What if the reason you feel saved but not truly free is because your spirit is wide awake, but your flesh is still sitting on the throne? You pray, you believe, and you genuinely want to grow, yet something keeps pulling you back into the same old patterns. This internal friction isn't a sign of weakness, it's a sign of war. Today, you are going to finally understand why that tension exists and how to break it for good. This message isn't for everyone, and it was never intended to be. It is specifically for the chosen one who has reached a quiet breaking point, the one who knows God is real but feels an inner resistance that refuses to vanish. You feel this tension every single day, don't you? It's a pull you can't quite explain, as if something inside you is alive but heavily restrained, being dragged in two opposite directions at the same time. One voice is constantly whispering about comfort, ease, distraction, and maintaining control over your own life. The other voice calls you to something higher, demanding discipline, truth, total surrender, and ultimate freedom. That friction you feel is not a sign of confusion, it is actually evidence of your calling. Only those who are chosen to carry weight feel this war so intensely within their own hearts and minds. Here is the hard truth that most people will never hear, and many will simply refuse to accept. You cannot feed the flesh and free the spirit at the same time. You cannot entertain both sides of your nature and expect to experience true peace. This is exactly why you feel saved yet not fully free, aware yet strangely restrained, and alive yet not quite unleashed. This discussion isn't about becoming more religious or following a checklist. It isn't about outward appearances or spiritual performance. It is about something much deeper and far more dangerous to the old version of yourself that you've outgrown. Today, I want to show you 5 powerful habits that systematically weaken the grip of the flesh and finally release your spirit into clarity, authority, and inner freedom. If you feel this message pulling at your heart right now, that isn't a coincidence, it's a moment of recognition. Before we go any further, I want you to pause. Like this video, so this message can reach other chosen ones who are still trapped in silence. Subscribe if you haven't yet, because this space is built for real transformation, not shallow faith. Comment 99 below as a signal spiritually. 99 represents leaving comfort to pursue completion. Now stay with me, because what comes next isn't meant to entertain your flesh. It is meant to confront it. There is a reason the habit of fasting is so often avoided, delayed, or explained away with endless excuses. It actually has very little to do with physical discipline and everything to do with the battle for control. The flesh doesn't fear your prayers as much as it fears a loss of its own dominance over your life. It survives by being constantly answered, constantly soothed, and constantly fed. It is trained to react the very moment any form of discomfort appears. The flesh stays loud by reaching for noise, pleasure, sugar, stimulation, or any form of validation and escape it can find. That is how it stays seated on the throne of your heart. Real fasting is dangerous to your old self because it interrupts that automatic cycle of craving and satisfaction. It introduces a sacred silence where impulse used to speak the loudest. It creates a space where your cravings expected immediate obedience but found none. In that space, something unsettling begins to happen. Your flesh finally realizes that it is no longer the one in charge of you. This is exactly why fasting feels so uncomfortable and frustrating before it ever starts to feel powerful. It's not because you are weak, it's because the internal hierarchy of your life is being challenged and restructured. Intentional denial is not just about the food on your plate. Food is simply the most obvious entry point to the soul. The deeper act is refusing to immediately answer the flesh whenever it demands relief or distraction. When hunger rises and you don't rush to silence it, you are telling your body that your spirit is the master. When boredom appears and you don't immediately try to numbing it with a screen, or when a desire knocks and you don't instantly comply, a new level of awareness surfaces. You begin to notice just how often your actions were not actually chosen by you, but were simply triggered by an impulse. That realization alone is a major fracture in the authority the flesh has over your life. Fasting isn't just the absence of nourishment. It is the radical redirection of your attention toward things that actually matter for your soul. While the flesh weakens through denial, the spirit begins to sharpen. Your spiritual sensitivity returns, and your discernment becomes much more heightened. What once felt like a normal part of your day suddenly feels heavy or out of place. What once controlled your moods begins to lose its urgency and power over you. You start to hear things differently and think with a new perspective. You find yourself responding to life instead of just reacting to it. This is true alignment. It isn't self-punishment. It's internal order being restored. The spirit doesn't need to shout to be heard. It simply waits for you to create space. Fasting creates that space with surgical precision. You will start to feel a clarity that is unfamiliar. It isn't just an emotional high, but something grounded and steady. The cravings that once felt irresistible will start to feel negotiable. The impulses that used to feel like emergencies will lose their ability to intimidate you. This is the moment many people quit, because the flesh protests the loudest when it realizes its grip is finally slipping. If you stay the course and don't rush back to your comforts, something shifts permanently within you. You realize that you are not your appetite, you are not your urges, and you are not your impulses. You are the one who gets to decide which voice to follow. Freedom begins right there, not when the desire disappears entirely, but when the desire no longer has the power to command your actions. Excess ends, clarity begins, and your spiritual authority returns quietly but firmly to its rightful place. This is why fasting has always preceded every great spiritual awakening throughout history. It isn't dramatic on the outside, but it is seismic on the inside. Here is the unsettling truth most people never reach. Once you experience the flesh losing its power, you can never unsee how much of your life it previously controlled. That realization sets the stage for the next habit, because once the flesh is weakened, something else is finally able to rise. What rises next will change everything about how you perceive the world. There is a silent reason why confusion keeps returning to your life, even after you've had moments of great clarity. It has nothing to do with your intelligence, your level of faith, or how hard you are trying. It has everything to do with what has been feeding your inner world on a daily basis. When no one is watching, the spirit doesn't usually collapse all at once. It starves gradually. Spiritual starvation is deceptive because it feels normal until a moment of extreme weakness finally appears and knocks you down. You aren't losing spiritual ground because you lack strength. You are losing it because truth has not been occupying enough space to govern your thoughts. The flesh thrives in noise, constant stimulation, and fragmented attention. It feels very comfortable in chaos. The spirit, however, does not compete with that noise for your attention. It responds to truth, and truth must be consumed intentionally rather than accidentally. The word is not just information to be skimmed through. It is alignment that is meant to be absorbed into your being. Every single day you wake up, something is shaping your inner authority. It might be your conversations, the media you consume, your old memories, or the pressure of expectations. None of these things are neutral. They either reinforce your clarity or they quietly distort it. When the word is absent, confusion doesn't announce its arrival with a shout. It slowly settles into your mind as indecision, emotional instability, and compromised boundaries. You start doubting what you once knew for sure, and you hesitate where you once stood firm. When you are spiritually malnourished, temptation starts to sound reasonable instead of foreign. That isn't a moral failure on your part. It's a result of being underfed. Truth doesn't just inform your spirit, it calibrates it. When you expose your mind to divine truth daily, your discernment sharpens without you even having to try. You begin to sense when something is off, before it ever manifests into a problem. The word cuts through the fog, separating truth from distortion and your purpose from the surrounding pressure. This is why the word is described as living. Living things respond, they adjust, and they confront. The word will challenge your assumptions and interrupt your comfort to reorder your internal priorities. That discomfort isn't resistance from God, it's correction for your own good. Authority is restored quietly when truth becomes the most familiar voice in your head. Temptation loses its volume not because the desire is gone, but because the truth has simply become much louder and more convincing than the lie. You stop negotiating with thoughts that used to dominate your afternoon. You stop entertaining internal arguments that once left you feeling exhausted. The Spirit begins to lead your life without needing to use force. This is why daily exposure is so vital. It's not about long sessions fueled by religious guilt, but consistent contact fueled by a genuine hunger for life. The flesh always wants something new and novel, but the Spirit craves depth. When truth becomes your daily intake, your very reactions to life begin to change. When the Word fills you consistently, you stop seeking external confirmation for every internal direction. You no longer need constant signs, wonders, or reassurance from other people. A quiet authority settles into your bones. You move through your day with a certainty that others can't explain. Confusion retreats and fear loses its leverage over you. This doesn't happen because life suddenly got easier, but because truth became the dominant force in your heart. Once truth takes up residence, your hearing changes completely. Voices that once sounded convincing now feel hollow and empty. Distractions that used to pull you away now feel too expensive to entertain. This creates a very dangerous moment for the flesh, because a spirit anchored in truth can no longer be easily deceived. That realization prepares you for the next habit, which stops being optional and becomes unavoidable. There is a reason prayer feels inconvenient exactly when you need it most. It's because real prayer threatens the very last illusion of your self-control. The flesh clings to the idea that it is in control. It doesn't actually mind spirituality as long as it stays passive, predictable, and contained within a Sunday morning. It can even tolerate religious routines and words spoken without any real heart behind them. But the moment prayer becomes real, honest, and sustained, something inside you will resist. Your thoughts will scatter, and a sense of urgency will appear everywhere else. That resistance is not weakness. It is the flesh being exposed to the light of God. Real prayer strips the flesh of its authority because prayer is an act of transferring governance. When you pray deeply, you are no longer managing outcomes or protecting your ego. You are surrendering command, and the flesh absolutely despises that exchange. Polite, scripted prayers don't disturb the status quo, but raw prayer confronts the things you've tried to hide. It drags your unspoken motives to the surface. Persistent prayer reshapes your internal posture until the flesh loses its voice through total irrelevance. Finally, we must understand that you cannot step into resurrection power while trying to protect what was meant to die. The tension you felt during this message was not a coincidence, it was exposure. God did not awaken your spirit just so you could survive on shallow peace and familiar cycles. You were freed to rise, not to drift. This awakening begins with quiet habits and daily surrender. Comment below the one habit you are activating right now. Type "I choose alignment over appetite" to seal this declaration. You were chosen to lead.